So welcome to Okta Workloads online meetup. My name is Max. I head education community for Okta Workloads. And the topic today is creating Okta users from an API using Okta Workloads. Now, this event is recorded, and then we'll publish the recording on Okta's YouTube channel. You'll receive a message tomorrow with a link to the recording on YouTube. And if you have questions, you can put them in chat, or there's also a Q&A section, whichever you prefer. Also, my email in that first, tile. Um, so if you have questions, you can always email me. So that's the only slide that I have. And let me switch to workflows and we'll get started. So as you know, the topic is creating Okta users from an API. And so the API that I'm going to be using is right here. Not the API, but the data. So this is Postman. I mean, you can use whatever other tool you want to make an API call. But so I have three users here, as you can see. So I have this JSON here with three users. So I have, user one right here, and then user two, and then user three. So we want to create those users in Okta. And again, I'm using Postman, but you can of course use any other tool. Okay. So now this API right here, this is from my testing before the meetup. I'm going to actually use a different endpoint once I create it. Well, let me go here. Let me go to workflows, and I'm going to create the first flow. So I've got folders here, and I'm in this online meetup folder, and I'm going to create a new flow. And I'm going to give this a name. So process, call this API users. Now, usually it's a good idea to give a description, but we'll just copy the same thing, just add a flow. Now, I'm also going to enable this option, and this is going to every time I run the flow, it will save the data in each execution, and you'll be able to see it once I test the flow. But again, that saves the execution data. All right. Now, so once you create a flow, you need to consider like how do you want to trigger the flow, right? What needs to happen for the flow to run? So there are several ways you can trigger a flow. Now, in this example, we're going to be using an API endpoint, and that means another system makes a call to an API endpoint, which in turn triggers a flow, right? So that's number one. Now, there are two other most common ways to trigger a flow. One is using an event. So if an event occurs in Okta, for example, user created, user suspended, and there's a whole list of events, and then you can trigger a flow. And then the third is on schedule. So you can run the flow on schedule. So maybe every hour, every day, every week, and so on. So three most common ways to trigger a flow. The first one is the API endpoint. That's what I'll be using today. That's what another system calls an API and triggers a flow. An event happens in Okta. It doesn't need to be Okta. It could be another system as well, another application. And then finally, the schedule. So every time you create a flow, you have to consider like, okay, I'm going to build a flow, but how am I going to run it? Like, what needs to happen for Okta to trigger the flow? Okay, so that's number one. So and because we'll be using an API endpoint, so I'm going to click Add Event. And right here it says API endpoint. And then it gives me some options here. So you need to set the security level. So the three options, you can do public, you can do secure with client token, and then auth 2.0. So I'll be using this option. And then what you need to do is you need to close, and then you need to save, and it will actually generate the token, the URL. So you click save, and then you go back, and then there's these brackets here, or this icon and then you click on it, and it opens the API endpoint settings. And then you have the invoke URL, And then if you need to, you can change the settings, right? So I'm going to copy this URL and I'm going to close. So now what we did is that now this, when we call the API endpoint that I just copied, and another system will call the API, it will run this flow, okay? So what I like to do is, even before I build the rest of the flow, is I'm going to turn this flow on, and you can see this option, save all data that passes through the flow. This option is here also. And now I'm going to go to Postman, right? And I'm actually going to create, well, you know what? Let me create a new request. So it's, let me open this. I'm going to create a new request, and I'm going to copy the URL, right? I'm going to change it to post. And then I'm going to go back to the previous one, and I'm just going to copy this, the data. Right? I'm going to put in the body like this, and I'm going to close the one. Okay, so this is the new one. Let me collapse this. So I'm not doing any processing. All I want to check here is that when I click send, I want this flow to run. Like this is the first thing I do when I have an API endpoint, right? So again, so the flow is running, and then I'm going to go to Postman, and I'm going to click send. All right, and it gives me a response, and it's right here at 200. And so what I do, I'm going to go back to my flow, and I'm going to click the execution history. And then right here, it will show me the execution. So this indicates that the request from Postman was successful, and this is the data. And if I look in the body, you can see the users that we sent. All right. Now, I can also run it again. Let me do this again. So I'm going to click send, go back. It should refresh automatically, but if not, what I usually do is just switch like this. And then we can see a second request. So there's a second request now. And so this is what the saving history does right here, is that if I go to the first one, I can see the data. So this is data from the first execution. And then I can go to the second one, and I can see the data in the second execution. Now it's almost identical, but this is the feature that it's also here, that it saves the data. Okay, it's going to make more kind of a sense once I build the flow, so you can see the data. But that's what this does, is it saves the execution data, and it's very helpful for debugging and testing the flow. Okay, but let me see if there are any questions. Okay, so this is the first step, right? So we can trigger the flow, and we know that we can make the call from Postman, and it works. So now we can continue building the flow. So I see the users here. Got 3 users. So now I need to extract the users, and then one by one create them. So I'm going to have 3 users here. So I'm going to extract the users, and to do that is I'm going to use a card or a function, and from the object category. And so the functions, I'm going to step back for a sec. So functions allow you to manipulate data, right? So you can create data, you can sort of format data, you can transform data. And you can see there are many different categories, from branching, error handling, working with text, numbers, true, false type logic, date and time, object list, and they're working with flows, folders, and tables. So there are a lot of functions to help you work with data. So the one I'm going to use is from the object, and the card or the function that I'm going to use is called get. Okay, and then what it does is that it likes to extract data from JSON. Let me see, there's one question here. I'm going to read the question. So there's in Postman, we've used the API to send the object through the token. So yeah, so we're just sending, we're just making the API call from Postman to workflow. So this is the API endpoint. So yes, I include the client token right here. right? So this is the full API with the client token in it, and then this is the body that I'm sending, the JSON with the users. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, so the object, so what it does, it extracts data, a key from a JSON object. So in general, most data, the format of data you'll be dealing in workloads is JSON, right? You can do XML, but most of it is going to be in JSON format, right? And so there are many situations where you need to extract a particular key from JSON, right? So if you have an object, you don't necessarily need the whole object. You need to extract one key. So this is what this card does. Now, so the object, so we already saw that the users are inside this body object. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take it and I'm going to map it like this. And then it prompts me to specify a path or a key. And what I also like to do, so you can go to Postman and you can kind of look at the JSON, and we can see that it has users, and then the users has an array or a list of objects. You can also go back to history and you can open the body field and you can expand it. So if you put anytime you have an object, if you put the mouse in the upper right corner, you'll see the two arrows. You can click on them and then you can see the object. So, okay, so it says users here, right? So what we do is we will go and I'm going to type users, right? And so this will give me an array of users. So again, let's go. I'm going to show you what you can do. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this whole JSON, copy the clipboard. And so what I also like to do when I use a get card is I like to test. Before I test the entire flow, I can test this card individually. So I'm going to click run this card. And then that's why I copied that JSON. I'm going to paste, right? And click run. And so what happens is that it says object, object, object. And so the reason for that is because the output is set to text. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually change it to object. And I'm going to run it again. And now it gives me the list of objects. Okay. So I like to do this to test before I run the entire flow. Also, what I also like to do is, and I recommend you do this as well, is that this is output. You can rename this just to give it more context. So if you click next to the type, if you click the little arrow and you go to customize, and maybe we'll give this a more useful, meaningful name, such as users, all right? You can also, if you want to, take it as if you can, it's an object, but it's a list of objects in our case, all right? So now, once we know this works, we now need to pass this to. So right now in workflows, anytime you want to process a list, you need a helper flow, like a subroutine. If you're coming from a programming background, to process each record at a time. So for that, we're going to create another flow, and I'm going to go back to my folder, and I'm going to create a new flow. And in this case, this is going to be a helper flow, right? And let's give this a name. I'm going to create user. Go like this, and then just keeping with the same flow, I'm going to save the data. Okay. So now we need to create the input into the helper flow. So I like to say record just to keep it generic because it's applicable to pretty much any type of data that you pass in. So one thing you also need to do is by default, it's text. And sometimes it will be text, but in this case, we're going to be sending a whole object. So we're going to change the object like this, right? The type. Now, so you can create more inputs and I'm going to also create title and I'm going to keep it as text. All right, so this flow has two inputs, record as an object, and then the title. So I'm going to save and I'm going to go back to my main folder, and process users. And now I need to add the next card, and it's a function card from the list category. And this one is called for each. It allows to process list items one at a time. So I'm going to use for each. And then it's asking me for a list. So I already have the list right here. So I'm going to take the list and connect it like this. And now next it's asking me, okay, so where's the helper flow? So right here. So notice what's going to happen. Notice right here, there's only one field concurrency. Okay. So notice when I select the helper flow, it will show two more fields here. Right. So before I do that, let me see, there's a question. Can we randomly name the inputs in helper flow, or does it have to be exactly as a JSON? So you can, with the for each card, you can give any names to the inputs. Now, when you set up the streaming, so there's another way to process record using the streaming option. When you use the streaming option, then the names, there's a specific names that you must use, right? So, but for each, you can use any names. So, all right. So again, notice there's one field. I'm going to click choose flow and create user. So notice what's going to happen. As you can see, it now showed two input fields here. So what it does is that it reads the helper flow, and it reads what inputs it has, and then it displays them here, right? So all I'm saying is that we got this list, we got the helper flow, and now we need to pass, inputs into these fields. All right. So if you change the helper flow, if you add a field or you delete an input field, so what you would need to do is do something like this. Click the helper flow again. It's already selected. Click choose, and it will update the fields here. But so that's how it works. It reads the metadata from the helper flow. So you see it says record. So this is the name that matches the one for the helper flow. And then there's an error here, and I'm going to select item. So I'm going to pass the entire object, each user, into the helper flow. Now, for the title, if I open here, it's like, oh, it only shows the item, right? So, but I want just a particular title. Okay, so what I need to do is, so because this is a custom JSON, right? So if you've used any Okta actions which return a list, you probably know that it will show you all the properties here under the object. But since it's a custom JSON or API, it doesn't know the format. So what we need to do is under the users, we can say title, then save, and then we see title here. So of course, this title has to match the key in the JSON itself. So if I go to Postman, we can see there's the title. All right. So this is working. Let's open the helper flow. There's an icon here. Click on the icon, it will open the helper flow. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn the flow on. I don't need to build the flow. I just want to make sure that I get the data here, right? So this flow is running, right? Let's do this. Go to Postman, click send. And so this will be execution number 3 here, I think. Yes. And if I go to create user, so we can see 3 executions. The first one, we can see that this is the first user and their title, second user and their title, and then right here, right? So this means, again, this is our helper, the for each and helper flow, they work. And now we can continue building the flow. So now we need to now extract data from record, right? Because we're going to be creating the user. And so for that, I'm going to use another function, also from the object category. Now I've used get, and it allows to extract a single key. But there is another one that works exactly the same way. It's called get multiple, that allows you to extract multiple items. I'm going to do a record like this. And I'm going to now, I have to go back to the JSON. So it's called login, and then first name, last name, and title. So login, and then first name, and then last name. So these have to match exactly. So I'm going to make a mistake on purpose here. I'm going to say title with uppercase, right? So now let's test this again. I like to test these cards before I actually run the entire flow. So I'm going to go to execution history. I'm going to open this record. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to click test. And then, so this is the JSON. Sorry, this is my Grammarly icon here. And so we can see, okay, so we extracted the first three fields, but the title is incorrect. And then I see, oh, well, of course, because title, it's capitalized here and it's lowercase here, right? So then we go, and then we can click and then customize, and then change it like this, then run again. And then, oh, now it works, right? So, all right. The last step here is we need to create the user. And so up until now, I've been using function cards. And as I said, these are cards to transform data, right? Create, edit, and so on. Now, actions. So Okta Workflows has over, I think now 90 connectors to various applications, right? And so these are API calls that you can make. Now, in this case, we'll be using Okta. So I'm going to be using Okta. And so this is a list of actions. Behind the scenes, these are API calls that you can make. So the one I'm going to use is create user, and you can search for it. So create user. And then for the option, we'll just keep it simple without credentials, and I'm going to click save. Now, whenever you use a connector, well, actually, let me finish this. So it's asking me which inputs do I want. So I'm going to use, these are selected by default, like username, first name, last name, primary email. I am also going to check title, right? And then you can show other fields. And for the outputs, you can, we don't need the credentials. We just need, I don't think we really care about this. Maybe just this is fine, right? And so this is how it looks. But before I was selecting the fields. So every connector you use, right, you need to create a connection. I have a connection right here, but anytime you use a connector, so if I, let's say I'm going to pick a connector for which I don't have a connection, maybe like, I know I don't have one for, let's see here, Oracle, HCM. I don't think I have a. So these are the actions, and let's say you want to do search for workers. And so this is how it's going to look, right? So it's going to prompt me to create a new connection, right? Or like in my case with Okta, I already had a connection. And so I'm using it right here. All right, so for the username, I'm going to connect the login, first name, last name. For the primary email, it's going to be login and then title, right? So activate, that's fine. We'll keep it like this. Okay, well, I think this is it. I'm going to go back here. Now, one thing also is recommended is that since this is an API endpoint, and I forget the number of seconds, but the server will keep the connection open. And it's possible that whatever you're doing takes longer than the connection will be open. It is recommended that you actually close the connection here. Okay. And the way you do it is that we go to the HTTP connector section, and there is one called close, right? and then it allows to close the connection. We're going to send the HTTP 200 code back, right? And so the connection, the actual connection is none, like we don't need any connection information, but we're closing just to tell the server, which is again, in this case, Postman's like, hey, look, we're good. We received the connection. Now we can continue processing the flow. So this is a good practice to do whenever you call a flow via an API endpoint to close the connection and then continue working. Because again, it is possible that whatever you're doing, logic could take longer that the connection stays alive by default. All right, so before I run this, let me see. I know there's some questions. Let's see, there's one. You could extract the title from the record within the working of the helper flow. Is there any benefit to extracting out the title before the helper versus within the helper? So I guess the question is about this. So yes, I kind of forgot to mention. So like this title right here is of course identical to this, right? So now in general, the outcome is the same. Like you get a title here, you get a title here. Now, if you go to Okta workloads docs, so what they recommend is instead of passing the entire list, is you only pass the fields that you need from the list, right? So you don't pass more data than you need into the helper flow. So that's kind of the general advice, okay? But you can, I mean, this object is pretty small, so maybe this won't make a difference. But sometimes the object has a lot of stuff. So, but perhaps also instead of doing this like the login first name in a separate card, you can also put it here. You can also do this as well. And so this way you don't need to use this object card. Oh, session expired. I don't know. I like using the get. It's the get the object get or get multiple cards. But sometimes I do, if I want to simplify the flow, if I want to use less cards, I'm going to define it here. So, all right. Let me see here. Can we also pass anything in the response that currently we saw? Yeah, I mean, you should be able to pass anything in this card. So yeah, you can pass the different code here. You can pass headers. So you can pass a body message as well. So let's see. Let's see. Do you have any documentation guidelines for how to set up and use Postman with Okta? I like the idea of Postman, but it gets easily confused since it's just a style of platform. Um, I know that Okta is like if you go into the developer site, um, I think Okta has collections for Postman. I don't use the collection myself personally. Like the most Postman I use is just like this, just testing APIs. But I would go to the developer site. I mean, they have collections, and I think these are kind of templates that you can make calls to Okta API. So hopefully that helps. I also saw a comment about the session. So yes, the session I think there's a way to make it longer. I think. Anyhow, but yeah, it expires. So you just have to sign in. Let's see, let's run this now. So we got everything here. We can go to actually this of course sign me out. So let me sign into my console. And okay. Okay, so we're in the people, directory people, and we're gonna go to, so let's check everything again. We're closing the connection, we're extracting the users and sending the title here. Did we test? Yeah, we tested the one here. I was gonna show this. Yeah, we tested the title. Okay, so let's go and let's go here. Let's click Postman. Let's click send. And so we get this 200 here. I probably should have added a message, but now I have to delete the users. But let's go here. Let's see. It should be about 31, right? So we're closing here and we're sending, extracting, and then sending to the helper flow. I go here. So we can see we're extracting and then we're creating the user. And if I refresh now, we can see that the 3 users were created right here. So, all right, yeah. So this is what I wanted to show you. And again, this feature right here that I mentioned in the beginning, save all data. So this is exactly what this. You can see the data. So you can select an execution and you can see the data. And this is extremely helpful for debugging and testing the flow because you can see how the data passes. So, all right. One thing I also want to say is that like when you test the card, right? So it doesn't say test, it says run the card. So it's actually going to run the card like against, like it's going to do whatever it does. So it's not a test, it's the actual thing. Now, like for example, here, if I was to test this card, I didn't, but it's actually going to create the users. So just keep that in mind. That's why it says run the card, it doesn't say test the card. Like I said test, but it will actually create the user if I was to test this. So something to keep in mind. All right. Well, that's what I wanted to show you. So to summarize, we built a flow that we can invoke via an API endpoint. We received the data from Postman, we extracted the list, and we send the list to helper flow. And in the helper flow, we received each record, we extracted the data um, from each record, specifically the login, first name, last name, and then we created the user. And just lastly, if I wanted to do this, if I wanted to, instead of the title here, this would be the same thing, right? I'm not going to run it because I have to delete the users. Otherwise, I'm going to get an error. But again, you could do this. Or you could also do this as well. So these are just different ways for extracting data from a JSON object. All right, so I'm going to save. And let's see their questions. So it says the URL we're using here is the same from the API endpoint card. Correct. Yes. So if I go, yes. So this URL, this is the invoke URL, and this is the URL right here. So if there was another system, right, not Postman, but you would use this endpoint. What if we activate these users? Will Okta use its own SMTP to send the default activation email? So yes, I believe there is actually, if I go to create user, let me see here. I think there was a card where it will send an email. I don't remember option. Maybe it was a different card. I think there's one card that does something. Maybe it's like the activation card, activate user, that sends an email. Let me see if I quickly can just, let's see, activate. Yeah, so right here. So I think it will use the Okta. Maybe there's a way you can change it and change it to your own SMTP server, but this is the one I was talking about. So this will actually, so the user um, already in the system, but it's just not active, and then you can activate the user. All right, let's see. why does the field get reset if you change the Okta connection, especially for application cards? So right here, yeah, this is just how the connector, this is just how it works. It will reset because um, it loads the metadata for the card, and I guess it just, it will um, it will reset the fields. It reads the data um, for the action, and so I guess that's why it resets. It could reset the fields. And Matt, is there a way to get email notification for these sessions? I'm assuming you're asking about the meetups. Um, so what I do is I post, so there are several places that I post these sessions. And I can include the links maybe in the message that I send. Yes, so I post these sessions on Slack. So there are two Slack channels, the Mac admin Slack and Okta admin Slack. I post there. I post on LinkedIn. There's also a page where we post sessions on Okta. And if I go to community, let me quickly show you. And then let me see, events. And I can send this workloads are coming in past events. And so I also publish events here on this page. And then there are also actually past in-person events, and then also a link to all the online events. And this is actually it's a list. So I mean it's a playlist. So there, yeah, I think those are the places. So Slack, I post here, I post on LinkedIn. So I think those are the best places to know what's happening. So yeah, I think this is like, I would bookmark, and I'm going to send this in the message. I would bookmark this page and see, and check the upcoming events, or again, the Slack, or in LinkedIn. Is there an Okta Slack channel? So there is no unofficial Okta Slack channel. So there's the Mac admin Slack, and there's also there's Okta admin Slack channel. And so if you go to getting started, Okta, Okta, oh, I misspelled. So if you scroll to this page, has all the resources we have, and if you scroll right here, there's the Mac admin Slack channel. There's no link to the Okta admins. I can edit here, but this is the Slack channel right here. So, but again, it's a third-party Slack channel, but there's a Okta Workloads channel, which is super active. So I definitely recommend you join. Now, is there any course we can enroll ourselves if we want to go for Okta Workloads certification? So for the certification, so there's the training you can take, and I think there's a link here, right here. So certification, let me see. So there is oh, sorry, this is the certification one. So this is, let me go back. Training, I was looking for this one. So you can start learning. Okay, so you can go here and you can take various workflow sessions right here. I need to update the link so it's a little bit easier to find. So it takes you directly to workflows. So if you select workflows here, And also, as for the certification, what I advise, so once you go to um, you take the premier practice exam. So that's going to prepare you really well for the actual exam. So there is a standard practice exam, which is very like just the multiple choice questions, but I advise you definitely take the premier practice exam because it's going to, again, prepare you very well for the actual exam. So, um, got it. There is an active channel in the Mac admin Slack. So yeah, the Mac admins is very active. I highly recommend you join, and people, you'll post a question and almost immediately you'll get a response. Like people just help each other very quickly. So I recommend that. Um, well, all right. I don't see any more questions, but let me put this again. My email, my first name, my last name, Rakta dot, well, max.cats. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. And you'll receive a message tomorrow from Zoom, and I'll include some of the resources that I shared here. And I think that's it. Let me see that when there will be discount session for attempting the Okta certification. So yeah, I asked the certification team, and they couldn't really like share with me. Like I don't think they know when they can offer the discount. I always just keep checking. I think they post on LinkedIn, and I told them, well, they said next time they have a discount, they'll tell me and I'll share on LinkedIn. So I don't know when, but once they tell me, I'll share it on LinkedIn. So um, that's that's the best. That's, I guess, the best answer I can give. So um, cool. Um, Thank you, folks. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.